Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So before we start, apologies for the delayed start. We were facing technical and internet issues and the session had to be slightly delayed. Nevertheless, let's begin with the discussion and let's look at the topics that we are going to discuss today. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive analysis. So let's get started. But before that, I have an important announcement. Now you can enroll for Unacademy's online classes at just 19,999, and this is a limited period offer for the Navratri season. And if you enroll within this period, you also stand to get free extension. Let's say you go for a 6-month subscription, you will get up to 6 months of free extension with 6 months of CSE Assure. And the same applies for 12 and 18 months of subscription as well. So you will not only get a free extension, but you'll also get TSC Assure guarantee from Unacademy. That is in case you don't clear the prelims exam. And if you meet these criterias, then Unacademy will extend your course free for the next attempt. So those interested, click on the link in the description below and ensure that you use the code IAS English to avail this offer. And if you want the PDF of the Hindu analysis session, please join our Telegram channel by scanning the QR code. We will be sharing the PDF over here after the session ends. So let's begin our discussion for today and look at the first article. On the front page, there is an important update related to India-US relations. India's Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has met with the Secretary of State of the US government, Marco Rubio. Now, this meeting between the foreign ministers comes at a very crucial point. The two ministers are participating at the UN General Assembly Summit, the General Assembly Summit, which is held every year in the month of September in New York. So, on this occasion, the two ministers from India US have interacted and they've taken stock of the relationship. Now, this essentially marks an attempt to repair the damage that has occurred in the India US relations. As we have been discussing in our previous sessions, Trump's hostile policies against India has led to a complete rupture of the trust-based partnership that we had built over the last 2 decades. Be it the 50% tariffs and the penalties on India for importing Russian oil, or the recent hike in the visa fees for H-1B visas, or the pressure that US government is exerting on India with regard to the trade negotiations. This has cast a shadow over India-US relations. So now both the governments are trying to break the ice. They're trying to reset the relations and trying to contain the damage. You might have seen President Trump has wished Prime Minister Modi for his birthday, and PM Modi responded as well. So now the meeting of the Secretary of State with India's foreign minister is a positive sign for the relationship. Because this week, the next few days of this week is very crucial for the relationship, as both countries are going to take forward the trade talks. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is also in the US to have negotiations with the Commerce Secretary and ensure that a trade agreement is worked out, a mini trade deal is worked out to deal with the tariff related issues between India and the US. So, in this context, the development acquires a lot of significance. So, this week we will have a lot of developments, a lot of articles related to this, and we will keep on covering this particular topic. But, however, the reason why I introduced you to this topic is because on page number 8, there is a very important and interesting article related to India US agricultural relations. Recently, you might have heard the US Commerce Secretary, Ludwig. He essentially ridiculed India and even put pressure on India for not even purchasing a bushel of corn from the US. A bushel, by the way, is a unit of measure used in Western metric systems for dry agricultural products. In case of corn, a bushel of corn is approximately 25 kilograms. The Commerce Secretary ridiculed India, put pressure on India, saying that India doesn't even import 25 kgs of corn from the US. Now, this article addresses the issue of corn and agri imports. Let's break this down. Let's look at this in detail, and I'll go beyond the article as well, covering some important facts, giving some important viewpoints and analysis to help you understand the nature of agri trade between India and US. See, the question being raised here is very simple. Why doesn't India import corn from the US? Let's say in the interview, you get asked this question, or in the mains, there is a question related to agri imports with regard to India US relations. Using corn as an example and taking a broader view at the agriculture sector, it's important to break down the relationship so you can understand why agriculture is a pressing issue when it comes to trade negotiations between India and the US. By the way, this is not a new issue. This issue has remained and persisted for many, many years. Even previous US governments have put that pressure on India to ensure India allows American products into the Indian market. So let's try to break down this topic and let's understand this in complete detail. So let's understand what is the relevance of corn when it comes to agriculture, food, and nutrition. Now, I'm sure all of you will agree that corn is not exactly a essential agricultural product. I mean, even if there is no corn, imagine hypothetically, let's say there is no corn production at all, the world will survive, right? Humans are not entirely dependent on it. My point is, it is not usually a staple food, correct? Yes, there are many countries which depend heavily on corn. In some regions, corn is considered as a staple, but in the Indian context, based on India's food and diet habits, corn is not essentially a major source of sustainable nutrition. Correct? I hope all of you agree with me. Human consumption of corn is quite limited. Yes, we do consume corn in different forms. But the point is, even without corn, you will still survive because it is not the most important source of nutrition. But corn occupies a very, very important role in today's global agricultural economy. Because part of corn or maize is indeed used for human consumption, be it the sweet corn that you consume and the variants of corn that is used for human consumption. So there is a certain extent of human consumption which is done. There are several regions in India where corn consumption is quite extensive. But as I said, it's not something that is defining your existence itself. It's not like wheat or rice or bajra, jowar. In that regard, corn occupies a slightly lesser importance. Even its nutritional value is not that great. So, as far as human consumption is concerned, the role of corn in the agrarian economy is quite limited, especially for a country like India. But corn finds many, many other applications, especially as animal feed for poultry, livestock. This is one of the major applications of corn, right? In the livestock industry, as poultry feed, as animal feed. Then corn is also used as feedstock for ethanol production. In India and around the world, there is a lot of usage of corn in producing ethanol for blending it with petrol or even sometimes with diesel. Then corn is also used for producing the high fructose corn syrup, which is widely used in the food processing industry. It is used to produce starch, again, used in the food processing industry. It is also used in the plastic industry, especially the husk and the outer layers, right? They find application in the packaging industry as well, right? So these are the wide applications of corn. But now looking at this, I'm sure all of you can tell me that India doesn't really have a critical existence or critical survivability on corn. Meaning, even without corn, the Indian economy, it's not that as if we are going to crash or collapse. What I mean to say is we do produce a significant amount of corn, but we are self-sufficient. We are self-reliant. We don't have much of a requirement for corn imports in the first place. Because first of all, in Indian culture, cuisine and diet, human consumption of corn is quite limited. Yes, it is largely used as animal feed for ethanol production. These are two major applications where demand is rising in India. But if at all we have to import, we are importing it from Myanmar and Ukraine, where it is available at a much, much cheaper cost. See, most of our domestic demand is met by our own farmers. We are almost 100% self sufficient when it comes to corn requirement. So, why should we import corn? And if at all excess corn is required for ethanol production, for animal feed in the livestock industry, we import the cheaper variety from Ukraine and Myanmar, which doesn't threaten Indian farmers. Now, why should we import corn from a developed country at a significantly higher cost and which could probably destroy our domestic producers? Indian farmers, please understand, will never be able to compete with farmers or the farming economy from a developed nation because there is a fundamental difference in the agrarian economy of a developing nation and a developed country. You take India on one side, US on the other side, or Europe or Australia on the other side. In India, 99% of our farmers are small marginal farmers holding very small parcels of land, hardly half an acre, 1 acre. So overall productivity is very, very low. Productivity in Indian agriculture remains low. Small marginal farmers are not able to afford the quality inputs that are needed to increase productivity. And most agriculture in India is largely subsistence. Farmers are just trying to survive, they're just trying to get through. That's not the case in developed agrarian economies like US or even in Europe and the other major agricultural developed nations. In the US, land parcels are massive. Each farming family or let's say even a enterprise, they end up owning on an average 500 acres of land. In India, most of our farmers don't even have 1 acre of land. In the US, the usage of machinery, that is farm equipment, inputs, is on a massive scale. The usage of better technology. So agricultural productivity is many, many times higher in developed nations like the US. So if you allow for, let's say, an Indian farmer to compete with an American farmer, there is no way that they can compete with quality or with scale or with regard to the productivity levels. This is the reason why India has always kept a high barrier, a tariff barrier, to block out agricultural imports from especially developed countries. You take corn, for example. India's productivity with regard to corn is 4 tons per hectare. You know what is the global average? Global average is 6 tons per hectare. So our corn productivity is below the global average. In the US, global productivity is 10 tons and above per hectare. So given the superior quality, better pricing, if such products are allowed to flood our market, these imports are going to destroy our farmers. Our domestic farmers won't be able to compete with them. So there is a valid reason for India as a developing nation to protect the farming community, who still form the backbone of our Indian economy. And also, please understand, in the US, lot of subsidies and government support is given out to farmers as well. During Great Depression, right, the US had a more welfare-oriented policy making under FD Roosevelt. They introduced the policy of food stamps to ensure hunger, nutrition problems are tackled, and farmers were heavily subsidized. Then, for the many last decades, US has been running a free food program in schools, which continues even today, which is subsidized by the government, where farmers are directly benefiting from it. During the recent recession, the 2008 subprime crisis, when the US economy had crashed, the US government stepped in and gave in a lot of subsidies and state support to the agricultural community. And also, please understand, in the US, farmers, when we say farmers, they are not individual farmers like in India. Usually, farming and all the connected businesses are large capitalist agri businesses. So if you are throwing open direct competition between Indian agriculture and American agriculture, then you are essentially pitting our small marginal farmers to compete with the American capitalist giant agri companies. The farming community in the US, who own very large parcels of land, who are wealthy enough to afford high quality inputs and machinery and get state support as well, they are providing the raw material, the feedstock for the agribusiness industry, which is heavily capitalized, driven by the profit motive. And they have the ability to dominate and flood the markets around the world. Let me tell you the example of Mexico. If somebody asks you, why don't we import agri products from these developed nations? Please tell them the example of Mexico. See what happened to Mexico when they started importing corn from the US. At one point, Mexico was a major corn producer. It was self sufficient. Because of the NAFTA agreement, the North American Free Trade Agreement, Mexico was forced to open its doors to American corn imports. And US corn flooded the Mexican market and it completely decimated Mexican farmers. So today, Mexico almost has 100% dependency on US when it comes to corn imports. And those Mexican farmers who were driven out of their business and livelihood, they were forced to eventually seek opportunities in the US as illegal migrants. And now they are being targeted for that as well. So look at the hypocrisy, the irony of this entire cycle. So this push by the US for India to open its gates for American farm products is largely driven by two objectives. And I want you to pay attention to this. There is a larger agenda that the Trump administration is trying to fulfill. There is a economic and a political agenda, and both are connected to each other. Now, if you look at the agri zones in the US, primarily in the Midwest, states like Iowa, for example, right? These are the primary producers of corn, soybean, etc., which are the top American exports. When it comes to agricultural commodities, corn, soybean are one of the top exports of the US market. And it is primarily cultivated where? In few pockets of the US, particularly in Midwest, states like Iowa, which are all Republican states. The Republican Party primarily dominates the Midwest. So I hope you're getting the political inclination. See, in the US, there is another category of crops, the commercial cash crops, your fruits, vegetables, etc., which are more used for human consumption. But the basket where cash crops are produced, like fruits and vegetables, is California. California is the blue state on the side of the Democrats. So for the Trump administration, which is a Republican government in power, the concerns of farmers in California doesn't matter, but the concerns of farmers and the big agri businesses in the Midwest, which are the core support base for the Republican Party for Trump's MAGA campaign, they are crucial in terms of political support, political donations. Now, very soon, the primaries will start. It will start to take place very soon to determine the presidential candidate for the next electoral cycle. These Midwest states will play a critical role. And in fact, the agricultural lobby, the corn, soybean lobby itself, is an extremely powerful, influential lobby, which can even influence American politics and exert pressure on the White House. So there is a clear political agenda, political motive here. Now, you might say there's nothing wrong with this. That's what every country would do or any government would do. They would be concerned about the vote bank. They would be concerned about their electorate. Correct? But look at the economic angle as well. Now, if you look at the economic angle, the US is a little desperate, especially the Midwest states are a little desperate. You know why? China has completely stopped importing soybean from the US. Thanks to Trump's policies to target China and the tariff wars, China retaliated by using its leverage. And what is China's leverage? China is one of the world's largest consumer of soybean. Because in Asian cuisine, in Chinese cuisine in particular, there is a massive usage of soybean in different forms. So China being the one of the largest consumers in the world, it has completely stopped soybean imports from the US, delivering a major hit to the agri businesses in the Midwest of the United States. So it hits at the direct economic political foundation of the Republican Party and Trump supporters. So what is their alternative? Their alternative is to bully India, pressurize India, and push the corn on India, as they're not able to dump soybean elsewhere, as China has stopped procuring it. They are looking to dump corn on India because they know in India there is not much demand for soybean. Though it is used in different forms, the demand in general is very, very limited. But corn is being pushed. You know why? Not for human consumption. The American agribusinesses know very well that human consumption of corn is very limited. They are trying to push it on India mainly for ethanol production and to be used in the animal feed industry, in the livestock industry. They know this is going to be good business. They want to create a dependency where India's ethanol production supply chains and the animal husbandry supply chains become dependent on American corn supplies. And also, don't forget, in the US, corn is a GMO, genetically modified crop. And right now, India has a moratorium on genetically modified food crops. We haven't even allowed GM mustard, GM brinjal. The only GM crop allowed in India is the non edible cotton. So, India has a moratorium on GM food crops and the rollout of genetically modified products. But this is where the other challenge will come up, right? India has ethical, legal concern with regard to genetic crops. So, why should India be forced to procure something it doesn't want? So this is something that explains the American pressure on India, the political economic objectives. Yes, we understand that US government would have its own interests, naturally, but in geopolitics, you can't pressurize, force, and threaten your partners and your close friends. That is not how you conduct a relationship. So let's see how the trade talks will progress. Because this week is absolutely crucial for India US trade relationship. Right now, the US is using all leverages possible to threaten India, to blackmail India, from raising the fee on H-1B visas to 50% tariffs that includes 25% penalty for procuring Russian oil, right? And maybe they will try to bring up more hostile methods to try and force India to agree to something, right? And one demand from Trump administration is for India to lower its barriers, the tariff-based barriers and market barriers that we have in place, to allow American agri products to flood our market because they know the size of the Indian market. This is where India will take a firm stand for sure. Because of course, Indian government would be worried about the well-being of the farming community. Of course, they form a vote bank for any ruling party, right? That's natural. You can't ignore the political angle and the economic and social angle. So, driven by these calculations and these interests, India would try to protect the agrarian interests while trying to strike a compromise because you can't break the relations with the US. US remains critical for us for weapon supplies, for investments, for technology, and there's a lot of dependency of our services industry on exporting to the US market. Our MSME industry, agriculture industry is dependent on exporting to the US market. So you can't break this relationship, but a fair compromise has to be arrived at. We can't be bullied, we can't be blackmailed, we can't be threatened. This should be done on the basis of trust, on the basis of mutual respect. So let's see what happens. But until then, take up this practice question. See, I believe that this article, though it focuses only on corn, why India doesn't import American corn, I think it will give you the entire picture, almost the entire picture about India US agri trade. So the question is asking agri imports from USA is fraught with risks for India. Evaluate with examples. So for this answer, you can diversify the points that you're going to include. In the introduction, maybe you can talk about the divide between developed versus developing nations when it comes to the agriculture sector. So this can be a good introduction. Without specifically naming India US, that you can discuss in the body. In the introduction, just point out that the fundamentals in the agriculture sector of a developed nation and developing nation, they are starkly different. Point out the differences. And in the body, you can go on to give the details of this by taking the US India relationship as an example. And within the agri sector, you can take maybe two, three different examples. One, of course, is corn, which we discussed. Other than this, maybe you can talk about the animal husbandry industry, like why India protects the dairy industry, right? Why we protect even the poultry and the meat industry, because this is a lifeline for our farming community. It provides that much needed supplementary income, additional income to our farmers. So why does India have such high barriers when it comes to dairy products, meat products, eggs, etc.? So that can be one line of discussion along with corn. Then you can also try to bring in cash crops. Is that clear? So try to give two, three examples here and explain why we have such high barriers. But at the same time, you can even highlight that India has a relaxed few restrictions. For example, we have made it easier for the US to essentially export almonds and even alfalfa. In the last decade itself, we have significantly reduced the duties when it comes to American almonds, alfalfa, and few other fruits, and as well as other commercial cash crops, which has actually benefited American farmers and the agri businesses there. So India has shown that flexibility, that relaxation has been given where it is possible. But in core sectors, we can't open up. We can't allow our farmers to directly compete with the American capitalist giants. So that is the core point you have to drive in. Always keep justifying why India should maintain some barriers against developed nations, right? But of course, you can even discuss that India in the long run should ensure we introduce agrarian reforms, uplift our farming community, shift farmers towards manufacturing and services, ensure the landholding size becomes larger, and ensure that they receive the right support in the form of right inputs and subsidies. So maybe shed some light, one paragraph on the requirement for agrarian reforms. So we strengthen the capabilities of our farming community to compete with global producers, right? And you can extend this as your way forward, as your conclusion as well. Can't always complain that we are on a weaker footing. That's why we are having these high barriers. Now you have to explain the current situation, but going forward, we have to become more competitive. We should eventually reach a stage where we should not fear the products from developed nations. Rather, our farming community should compete with them. So that should be the eventual way forward, the long-term plan that you can discuss in the conclusion part. So using this approach, try to practice your answer writing and please post your answers in the comment section as well. Now let's move on and look at the next article. On page number 6, there's a very interesting column. It's related to traditional medicine. It focuses on the rising popularity, the rising appeal for traditional medicine. By the way, the article is written by the Union Minister of State for Ministry of Ayush and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So this article provides great insights from the government's perspective on why traditional medicine is gaining more popularity and relevance. So this can be an important topic in economy and in related subjects as well. Now, when we say traditional medicine in the context of India, we are primarily referring to the Ayush stream of medicine. Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Siddha, Homeopathy. And amongst them, particularly Ayurveda and Yoga, have been gaining a lot of global popularity and global acceptance. In India as well, the Ayush sector has grown exponentially in the last decade. Today, we have a dedicated ministry to promote traditional medicine, the Ministry of Ayush. The government has invested considerable effort, money, and resources to promote traditional medicine both domestically and as well as abroad. In fact, promoting Ayurveda, yoga, and traditional medicine has become part of our soft power diplomacy today. Because there is a clear cultural element of heritage attached to traditional medicinal systems. Yoga has been globally accepted much before India started promoting it. Ayurveda is slowly gaining more and more traction and especially in countries where there is a strong Indian community, Ayurveda is widely followed. For example, you take countries like Mauritius, countries like Fiji, several countries in Africa, in the Caribbean, wherever there's a strong Indian community, especially the descendants of the Indian indentured laborers who were transported during the British era. They have a wide acceptance for traditional forms of medicine like Ayurveda, yoga, and the government is giving a very active push for traditional medicine in these countries. Ayush centers are coming up in Mauritius and Fiji. India is supplying Ayurvedic drugs and medicines as well. So there is a soft power appeal to create goodwill and trust, a cultural appeal for our foreign policy while promoting the domestic industry. Studies have estimated that the traditional medicinal industry in the world will hit $540 billion this year. Just imagine the size of traditional medicinal industry. According to the World Health Organization, according to WHO, 88% of its member countries, that is 70 out of 170 out of 194 countries, they have a wide acceptance for Ayush stream of medicine and other forms of traditional medicine. Because, for example, in China, right, there is Chinese traditional medicine. In Southeast Asian countries, there are local traditional medical systems, right? And you find this across the world, in Australia as well, in African countries, in Central Asia, even in Russia. So across the world, especially wherever native communities are present, there is a traditional knowledge which is formed through ancient wisdom. You can't simply dismiss that. Maybe not all of it could be scientific, but at least a vast majority of it would be based on experience, lived experience. That ancient wisdom, when you harness that and merge that with modern technology, modern research, right, you can transform the sector of healthcare itself. So WHO says that in 88% of the countries, 170 out of 194, there is a very, very strong appeal for alternate medicinal systems. I hope you're aware, recently WHO has partnered with India to set up the Global Center for Traditional Medicine. It's being established in Gurugram on the outskirts of Delhi. On the outskirts of Delhi, India is hosting the WHO Global Center on Traditional Medicine to focus on research, to provide scientific validation to the ancient wisdom of traditional medicine and traditional knowledge, to bring in digital technologies as well to transform the sector. The sector is already valued at $540 billion this year. So imagine the scale and size at which it can grow, right? And India is one of the top markets. In India, the size of our Ayush industry is at around $43 billion. China is at the top. China's traditional medicinal industry is at around $122 billion approximately. Even in countries like Australia, there is a $4 billion herbal medicinal market, right? So there is a global market for this. Now, for example, in India, because of the sustained government efforts, we see a big jump in manufacturing when it comes to traditional medicine and also in the services of traditional medicine. Cumulatively, the manufacturing and services in traditional medicine accounts for nearly 3 lakh crores in market size. There are several micro small enterprises that produce these Ayurvedic drugs and medicines of alternate medicinal systems. This is a market which is a size of around 1.3 lakh crores. The services offered under Ayush stream of medicine is around 1.6, 1.7 crores, 1.7 lakh crores. Cumulatively, this is a 3 lakh crore industry. It has grown exponentially. The exports are also rising. We are exporting roughly around $1.5 billion worth of alternate medicinal products to other countries. And this can only increase going forward as we create a bigger global appeal through our diplomatic push. The reason why traditional medicine remains popular is because it is affordable, it is accessible. Please make a note. The reason why there is global popularity for traditional medicine is because compared to your allopathic medicine, this is more affordable, accessible to the poor people, to the common people, right? And also, don't forget, there's one fundamental difference when it comes to modern allopathic medicine and traditional medicine. Usually, well renowned, well recognized traditional medicinal systems like Ayurveda, um, or the Tibetan medicinal system, right? Or the Chinese traditional medicine system, they are all rooted in ancient wisdom, and it's based on preventive care, right? Proactive, preventive, curative care, where the focus is on changing your fundamentals. For example, look at yoga, look at Ayurveda. It addresses all the aspects of the physical body, the mind, the soul. It essentially fuses wisdom with scientific knowledge with spirituality, right? And you find similar elements in traditional medicinal systems around the world. Whereas modern allopathic medicine is completely different. It takes a very different approach. Yes, it's more scientifically, um, there is scientific rigor in that, but no doubt. But the approach of Western English medicine, what we call as, is largely driven by symptomatic treatment, right? More than proactive, it's a reactive approach. So what you need is a good fusion of both. You can't simply abandon modern English medicine or allopathic medicine, right? So that is what is required to deal with the healthcare challenges of today. But traditional medicine can be one of the supplements. It can be a backup, which can bring more healthier living, lifestyle changes. And don't forget, it is more sustainable. So systems like Ayurveda, yoga, they are naturally sustainable, climate friendly, environment friendly, and in a way, it is connected to nature. Products come from nature, the natural raw materials and raw ingredients. So it results in protection of biodiversity and ecosystems, because usually there are several tribal communities which produce these herbal products, Ayurvedic drugs, etc. Right? You take Hakki Pikki tribe, for example, in Karnataka. They produce these herbal oils which are widely popular across the world, and they're all largely drawn from natural products from the local forests. So these communities have a natural interest to protect the forests. So they play a role in environment conservation, and it truly promotes sustainable living and promotes a healthier lifestyle as well, to deal with lifestyle related disorders and non-communicable diseases. So good fusion of modern scientific English allopathic medicine with traditional medicine that focuses on preventive care is what is required, and that's what the government of India has been trying to do. Yes, there are concerns about few practices in homeopathy, few practices in Ayurveda. There is no doubt those questions have to be raised, because if you're a person of scientific temper, there are certain practices which are not um, the true essential practices which have been passed on through generations. But you can't discard systems like Ayurveda or the other traditional medicines, because there is ancient wisdom in it. There are many therapies which work in help, basically preventing the disorders which might prop up later. It focuses on curative, preventive healthcare. So what you need is to take the best from both the worlds and fuse them together to build a good healthcare system. And that is where the Minister of State is focusing upon. He's saying that traditional medicine is affordable, accessible to people. There was a survey, the National Sample Survey that was conducted in India. The popularity and usage of Ayush is more than 50% in rural areas and urban areas. That shows the appeal for it as well. So the right fusion of both is what is needed in a country like India. That is what we take away from this article. So please take up this practice question. Traditional medicine remains vital for India's healthcare ecosystem. So to justify the argument, I've given you the data, the numbers as well, why traditional medicine is crucial for healthcare ecosystem in our country, critical for our economy as well. So using those data pointers, try to explain your answer. Try to argue that yes, traditional medicine remains relevant, but never ever discard the focus on scientific temper. See, today we can apply modern research and development and innovation. We can even bring in AI and digital technology to transform traditional medicinal systems. That's what India is trying to do. In fact, the WHO Global Center on Traditional Medicine is focused on bringing AI technology to transform traditional medicine in India and around the world. That is exactly what should be done. Focus on the scientifically relevant aspects, discard the rest. There might be few wrong practices which could have crept in, right? But you can't discard the entire system itself that is rooted in traditional knowledge and ancient wisdom. So try to bring out that aspect and justify why this is a key part of our healthcare system and how it can supplement our modern traditional, how the traditional system can supplement the modern allopathic healthcare system. Now, coming to the next article, there is a very interesting column written by a trans woman. It focuses on transgender rights. This article is a very powerful emotional appeal by a trans woman for a country to wake up and realize why trans rights are important, rights of gender minorities is important. The transgender community, which falls under the bracket of gender minorities, they have been the subject of discrimination, abuse, oppression for not just decades, but for centuries. Right from being discarded by their own families, right? Quite literally, families often throw out any member who's from the trans community. They are abandoned, especially at a growing up age. So it disrupts their education. They are not given access to good schooling or colleges. And if someone comes out as a trans person during their education years, they are not given admission, they are removed from the educational institutions as well. It's almost impossible for them to find jobs. Even if they get a job, right? They're not seen as equals with males and females. They're not seen as normal. They are essentially viewed in a voyeuristic sense, and they're ridiculed, and they're even oppressed and abused as well. And eventually, it pushes them to basically look for survival, to look for basic necessities like hunger, housing, and some livelihood, which pushes the gender minorities towards trafficking, towards prostitution, resulting in a wide variety of socio-economic and healthcare related concerns. See, today, the government has come a long way in India in recognizing transgender rights. The third gender is recognized in every single application form that you see, right? There is that official recognition given to the third gender. And we have the law that was enacted in 2019 by the Parliament of India, the Transgender Persons Rights, Protection of Rights Act, that accords a set of legal rights to the trans community. But the mere enactment of a law is not sufficient, according to the writer. That is the crux of this article. Yes, the government has recognized the third gender. It has tried focusing on ensuring social justice for gender minorities, for the LGBTQ plus community. There is a dedicated law in place as well, securing certain rights, privileges, and quotas for the trans community. But despite this, the trans community in India is denied basic human rights and basic human survival. Their day to day life becomes a hell, becomes a nightmare. Right from getting a basic education, right from getting basic respect and love from their own family members, to even getting a job or sustaining a livelihood, or even as basic as feeding themselves, or as basic as getting a house for themselves. It has become impossible for them, right? Let's say, with regard to the housing problem, a transgender person approaches a landlord. 99% of the landlords will not rent out their properties to them. Today, there are few companies which focus on diversity and inclusion. Government itself provides for few quotas. Even if trans community members land a job, they often end up facing ridicule, discrimination throughout their career. They're not just sidelined, they're mistreated, abused as well. So this is what has to change, according to the writer. Just having a law and policy is not enough. It's about transforming the society, bringing that change in the mindset of the people. Ensure that trans community, gender minorities get basic treatment, basic respect, basic human rights and love and respect. So that is the core point, the core argument, which I'm sure any progressive individual would completely agree with. Because by ignoring the gender minorities, you are losing out as a nation. Now, don't you think a trans woman or a trans man, or anyone from the LGBTQ community, don't you think they can become a great athlete? Don't you think they can become a great doctor, a scientist, or serve the nation, the economy in many different ways, or become a great artist? By denying them all these opportunities, you're cornering them, pushing them towards immoral activities, towards beggary, prostitution, etc. Because there's no other means of survival for them. So you are essentially othering an entire section of your own population, of your own uh, society, denying them constitutional rights and basic human rights. So this is a question, a very profound question the writer is raising. That is something that all of you can ponder over. Now, coming to the next topic, on the front page, there's an article related to Pakistan bombing itself. Pakistan is one of the few countries in the world which is known to bomb its own territory repeatedly, again and again. So, Pakistani Air Force has carried out aerial bombings. These were large scale aerial strikes focused on the KP province, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, that borders Afghanistan. The target was the TTP, the Pakistan Taliban, or the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. This is the Pakistan faction of Taliban, which is seen as a threat for the Pakistani state. Now, Pakistan stands accused of committing very serious human rights violations, both in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and as well as in Balochistan province. In Balochistan, where Pakistan is dealing with the Baloch insurgency, Pakistani armed forces and intelligence agency ISI are accused of violating human rights of the Baloch people. Similarly, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where Pakistan fights the TTP, which is seen as a brother organization of the Afghan Taliban, which has support from across the border, right? The Pashtun community that you find across the Durand line, both in Afghanistan, Pakistan, they back both factions of Taliban, the Afghan Taliban and the Pak Taliban. Afghan Taliban, which is now in power in Afghanistan, which has formed the interim government, is known to back and support the Pakistan Taliban and shelter them as well. This has led to a friction and divide between the Pakistani state, because between the Pakistani army and the intelligence agency ISI and the Afghan Taliban. There was a time when Afghan Taliban was seen as a puppet of Pakistani agencies. But today a split has come up because Afghan Taliban is accused of sheltering the Pak Taliban, which is made up of the same Pashtun community, and Pakistani state has been targeting them. And this is a ongoing problem. In the last couple of years, especially, Pakistani army has conducted cross-border strikes as well. It has carried out heavy artillery firing. It has rounded up several people. The ISI runs massive covert operations over here, and it is accused of targeting civilians and violating human rights on a massive scale. And every time Pakistan blames India for the problems in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Pakistan has alleged that India's RAW is involved in sponsoring and backing these insurgent and terrorist organizations. But it has never presented even a shred of proof or evidence to link these organizations with India or India's RAW. India denies all these allegations firmly. And Pakistan, as I said, has never been able to bring up any substantive proof against India. But the point is, Pakistan is dealing with a massive security crisis. This incident proves that. So during these aerial bombings on Pakistani soil itself, 23 civilians have been killed. Pakistan says this is a war against terrorism. But how can you justify the killing of so many civilians, right? So this is the internal crisis Pakistan is dealing with, a major security crisis that has engulfed the Baloch region and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region. Yeah. So this is one development that you should be aware of. Next, with regard to defense, there is a very important article today that talks about the progress the Indian Navy is making, the futuristic plans of the Indian Navy, the extent of indigenization which is happening when it comes to shipbuilding technology in India. So let's quickly discuss this and shed some light on this interesting topic. There can be a mains question on India's defense indigenization, India's modernization of the Navy, the plans that we have. The Indian Navy has set a very ambitious goal for itself. By 2035, in another one decade, Indian Navy wants to have 200 ships and submarines in its arsenal. It wants to transform into a true blue water navy with at least 3 aircraft carriers and with a small fleet of nuclear powered submarines, along with all the category of vessels and underwater systems, right from underwater remotely operated vessels and drones to missile frigates, corvettes, anti submarine warfare vessels, etc. The Indian Navy is looking to expand its fleet of ships and submarines, and it plans to commission 200 vessels and submarines in the next decade, to own 200 by the end of 2035. Now, the glad part is that the good news is that most of the naval ships which are being built, they are largely indigenous. This is a testament to India's vision of becoming Atmanirbhar. For example, we have shipbuilding companies like MDL near Mumbai, Mazgaon Dock Limited. We have the GRSE, Garden Reach shipbuilders from Kolkata. We have the Hindustan Shipyard Limited, Vishakhapatnam. So they are able to execute these projects with flawless precision. And the Indian Navy has an in-house design bureau which designs the warships that are required. So Indian Navy has completely brought this in-house. There's a naval design bureau which designs the warships, and it is indigenously produced by these shipyards in India. So the extent of indigenization is growing, and many more vessels and submarines are going to be rolled out very soon. Recently, the Indian Navy has brought out INS Androth, anti-submarine warfare vessel. It has more than 80% indigenous content. So that's why I'm telling you, the focus is on Make in India. We are reducing our imports. And one of the last 100% foreign made vessel is INS Tamal that we got from Russia recently, right? So going forward, almost every naval vessel that would be used by the Navy would be partly built in India. Very soon, India might even achieve 100% indigenization, or at least 90% indigenization. So this is a testament to the ongoing transformation of the Indian Navy's procurement. And from being a buyer's navy, today we are becoming a builder's navy. From being just a buyer's navy, because we used to buy all the naval equipment at one point some years ago. But today we are transforming into a builder's navy where India is building on its own. This gives us that autonomy, that strategic independence, and it allows India to truly project its power, right, far beyond the Indian Ocean region. And in a way, it aligns with our vision of the Mahasagar doctrine. Then, coming to page 12, there is this article related to water pollution in our rivers. See, water pollution in rivers is constantly monitored by the Central Pollution Control Board. It uses an indicator, a very key parameter known as BOD, biological oxygen demand. So what is BOD, biological oxygen demand, that is used to determine water pollution levels? BOD is basically a proxy for the amount of organic matter present in a water body. So if BOD is very low, it means the river is healthy, the water is healthy, the water is pure. If BOD rises up, it means there's more organic matter, meaning there's more contamination. It means there could be mixage of sewage water. That's why organic content would have gone up, increasing the demand for oxygen to break it down. So higher BOD indicates higher pollution, lower BOD indicates cleaner water. So according to the CPCB report, which keeps track of rivers and water stretches which are clean or which are polluted, we have seen a slight marginal improvement in water quality. With regard to number of polluted river stretches, now let's say you take river Ganga, Mahanadi, CPCB measures water quality at specific stretches to determine whether it's polluted or not, whether it's fit for bathing or not, right? So if the BOD levels are alarming, then the stretch is declared as highly polluted and bathing is prohibited. You should not bathe in such waters. It can be detrimental to your skin health and human health. So the number of such places in India across our rivers has slightly declined. You can see the graph over here. You see that slight decline, a very marginal decline happening in terms of the polluted river stretches. And also the number of polluted rivers has seen a slight drop as well. And it's a slight improvement for India. Though the numbers are still concerning because there are many stretches across our rivers which is completely unfit. Forget human consumption of that water. It's not even fit for human bathing as well, right? So water pollution remains a serious concern. So any such findings of CPCB can be important, and especially key indicators like BOD can come up as a question. Now I'll give you a small homework, small assignment. There is another indicator known as COD, chemical oxygen demand. Can you please read about this and mention what it is in the comment section below? Coming to the last article for today, prelim section. China is evacuating lakhs of people to ensure that people are taken to safety as a super cyclone, a super typhoon essentially, is threatening this part of the region. This typhoon has been named Typhoon Ragasa. So it originated in the Philippine Sea. So see, in the Pacific region, in the North Pacific, tropical cyclonic activity is quite intense. Countries like Japan, then Philippines, of course, China, even the Korean Peninsula, and Taiwan, of course, they are in the direct line of fire of these mega tropical cyclones. In this region, cyclones are known by a different name. The phenomena is exactly the same, but cyclones over here in East Asia, in the North Pacific, is known as typhoons. Whereas in Northern Indian Ocean, that is in Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, where India is located, we just call them cyclones or tropical cyclones. Then towards United States, towards the western part of the Atlantic, right, towards Gulf of Florida, towards Mexico and the east coast of US, the same cyclones are known as hurricanes. Then we have Willy Willy in Australia. Now, can you find out how cyclones are named? What is the naming system that is there? Why is this typhoon called Ragasa? In the case of Indian Ocean cyclones, there are certain names that are assigned. So can you find this out? UPSC has already asked a question about this. We have discussed this many times. So can you just let me know in the comments how cyclone naming is carried out? What's the protocol for this? So that is another homework for you. On this note, I bring the analysis to an end. I hope you have understood everything. And if you have liked the session, do press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching.